Hey guys, I am on the Forerunner server, and the reason for it is there are two new heroes being added, Boreas and Trusk, a mage for the Esoteric faction, and a defender, Trusk, also for the Esoteric faction. So this is the Forerunner server. These heroes are not on global, and they probably won't be coming to global anytime soon, but I do like to take a look at the heroes coming out in future, and hopefully you enjoy seeing them as well. So let's go over them one by one. We have Boreas up first. He is a mage for the Esoteric faction, or Esotericist. We'll start with his base stats. We can see that at max, so at level 60, he has a standard attack range for a mage. He has kind of standard HP, but 4.6k attack is actually fairly high for a mage. I've just moved over to the gallery so we can compare. These are all of the mages on the Forerunner server. From what I remember, Kriya had the highest base attack of the mages at 5.2k attack. But if we look at someone more average, I think Nocturne is around 4.6, Lasir 4.1, Vierna is at 4.3, and we'll do Carmet last as he's quite a common one. He is 4.6 as well. So I guess it's actually not super high, but 4.6 is pretty good. It's definitely on the higher side of the base attack. And his attack interval at 2.6 is kind of standard. So that is the base stats, 19 cost. So all kind of in line for Boreas. He does magic damage as pretty much all mages do. So let's jump into his talent and his skill. So the talent, first up, when attacking, there is a 10% chance to inflict freeze. However, this is a 3-second duration freeze. This is pretty nice, actually. I quite like this as freezes go. That is quite a substantial duration. His basic attack is just simply 100% to one enemy. His ultimate, Frosty Endowment, is a 1300 rage cap at max skill that goes to 1200, so still pretty high, but pretty typical for Esotericists. They tend to rely on Lords to reduce that. And he has a starting rage of 700. The duration is 16 seconds by default, but goes up to 20 seconds at max skill. And what it actually does is it activates Eternal Ice Haven and increases his damage by 275% up to 300% for the 16 to 20 second duration. So he still hits in single target, he just gains up to 300% bonus damage for up to 20 seconds. It's quite a big damage increase. He doesn't have the craziest base attack, but pretty good base attack, so it's definitely quite a lot of damage, but by itself not insane. So what is Eternal Ice Haven? Well, when allies inflict freeze on enemies, they take additional massive damage, and the additional damage is affected by the duration of the freeze inflicted, and it has a cooldown of 1.5 seconds. So at a minimum of every 1.5 seconds, when an enemy is frozen by an ally, there is scaling damage done to the enemy based on how long the freeze is. I'm assuming this includes himself because a 3-second freeze is actually pretty beefy. So these freeze procs for 3 seconds, proccing while his ultimate is active, should do quite a lot of damage. We have no idea how much damage it will do, it's just supposedly massive damage. So hopefully it's quite a good scaling amount. But he also has the damage bonus, so it could be really, really high damage when he does freeze enemies. I'm not sure off the top of my head who has the biggest freezes in the game at the moment. Of course there's Mary, so he would work pretty well with Mary. There is also Brokir, that would function quite well, and there's King Haas. Those are the three that popped in my head immediately. But that freezing and stunning combination, freezing enemies, dealing bonus damage to them, would make him very good in the Chapter 9 content, I believe, in the campaign. Because you could have a Brokir tanking and a Boreas like kind of supporting him, and combined they should be able to do a lot of damage. Though this seems like it's not necessarily within his range, so maybe it can just be anywhere across the map if a freeze is inflicted. So that would be very powerful potentially. Alright, so passives. First passive, Chilling Blow. He deals an additional 35 to 50% bonus damage to enemies who are frozen. That's pretty decent, but you need to have a lot of uptime on freeze. I think really you're going to run him with a Mary in the team. A Mary built with attack speed, with the Nightmare Samsara, I think it's called, artifact. And you're just going to be trying to freeze as much as possible with Mary. I think that would be the best synergy so far. And then finally, his second passive, Frozen Purification. It has a 20-second cooldown, can be reduced to 16-second cooldown. When deployed, he deals 240 to 300% magic damage to enemies in his attack range, and he also inflicts a 1-second freeze on up to 3 enemies within that attack range. And yeah, this can only be triggered one time every 20 seconds afterwards. Oh, wait, okay, so it actually triggers every 20 seconds. That's pretty cool. So every 20 seconds he freezes 3 enemies for a second and deals up to 300% damage. So he's ambiently dealing 300% damage. Because of the cooldown, at max skills it's guaranteed to land within his ultimate, so that's pretty cool. But you could obviously synergize and time that. And this should scale on enemies being frozen as well. So I don't know if it applies because it's applying freeze, if the damage is counted with this passive Chilling Blow as well. But if not, then maybe you want to make sure they're frozen before the timing of this if you do need to min-max it. But I like his kit overall. I have to say it does not seem devastating at the moment because it's very single target focused. We do get an AoE burst every 20 seconds, but I mean, that's kind of, it's not very reliable. But other than that, it's just lots of single target damage. But I love that he synergizes with freeze heroes. He synergizes with Mary, with Brokir. I think that's really cool. So I'm interested to see how good he is. So let's jump into his awakenings. The first awakening, I think, is really good. I've had a look at this already. During the ultimate, the trigger chance of his talent increases by 20%. His talent is the 10% chance to freeze for 3 seconds. So during the 20 seconds of his ultimate, it now is a 30% chance to freeze for 3 seconds. So I think that's cool. I think you would want to build this guy with pretty good attack speed, and he's like a legendary Mary to a degree. I mean, not really. He doesn't apply the vulnerabilities, and he doesn't have an AoE freeze outside of every 20 seconds, which isn't bad, actually. But yeah, he kind of... You build him attack speed, and you could freeze very reliably, and he could just lock down tanky elites, I think, very, very, very effectively. So that's where I see him in my head at the moment. I think he'd be very effective at that kind of stuff. Second awakening, 5% attack. Third awakening is bonus 50% damage to his, timed burst, so every 16 seconds and on deployment. So that would become, at max skill ups, I think that becomes 350% burst damage, right? Oh, it's 280, not 300%, my bad. Bad maths. So at max skill ups, that would be 330% with the Awakened Free, which is a pretty good AoE burst of damage. The fourth is more Rage Regen Auto, and the fifth is 10 seconds on his ultimate duration. So that becomes a 30-second duration on his ult, boosting his damage and dealing damage to enemies when they are frozen. So overall, I think it's a pretty good kit. I quite like him. He's in an unusual faction, but it makes it easier for him to fire his ult off more often because it's a very high rage cap. I do like him. I think his design is pretty cool. I like that they're moving more into the CC stuff with freeze. I think that's a really awesome build type. So I'm interested to see how he performs. I'll probably do some testing on the test server with him, and I'll probably try and update him on my tier list at some point, though I've got a big backlog of heroes to get through at the moment. So overall, I think it looks cool. I think he seems very interesting. We'll have to see how he actually performs, but I think he'll be very good as a first impression. So the next hero to discuss out of the two that have been added is a defender, and it is this guy, Trusk. He is another defense scaling defender, the second one. I think he looks pretty cool. I like the design, kind of like a lightning spined lizard guy. Sumo Salazar. I mean, look at that. That's pretty cool. That's pretty flashy. All right, so what does he do? He has a two tile attack range as a defender, and he deals magic damage, so that's kind of good to know. As for his base stats, 29k health is pretty good. 3k attack, 3.9k defense is pretty high, and 3 attack interval is okay, I guess. 19 cost is slightly high for a defender, or maybe it's a little bit high. But 3.9k defense, how does that tally up compared to the other ones? So 3.6k on Haas. Garn is one of the main ones. He's 4k, so he's obviously very high defense on defense scaling because, he's one of the first. 4.2k on Regulus. Then on Torador, we have 3.2k. We'll take a look at you. About 4k on Reeve. 3.8k on Crodor. And that brings us back to Trusk of 3.9k. So it's definitely decent. It's not bad, but it's not insane. I mean, we have Azhor at 3.2k because his base stats suck. And we have this guy, Cyrus, who I think is super cool, and his is 3.2k. So, yeah, okay. His base stats are decent. His health is very nice. And he has good defense. Not insane defense, but good defense. Definitely on the higher side. So, what does he actually do? Well, it's 2-tile attack range, as we said, which is nice. All damage scales off defense. Each basic attack launched has a 15% chance of triggering a roll, dealing 120% AoE damage to at most 3 enemy targets in range, so in these 2 tiles, or his tile, and knocking them up. And additionally, when HP is below 50%, he restores 5% max HP for every 4 instances of damage taken. That's actually really good. That's a really nice talent for a defense scaling hero. He shouldn't be taking big chunks of damage. He should be kind of getting chipped away at by smaller instances. So this will help him passively recover from that. So that's quite a nice utility for a defense scaling defender. As for his kit, his basic attack, 1 enemy hit, pretty standard. His ultimate, Thunderfawn. 1200 rage cap goes down to 1000. He is esotericist as well. He has a starting rage of 600, so that will be 60% starting rage at max skill ups, and the duration is 15 seconds. With a single skill up, it goes up to 20-second duration. So what does it do? Well, it increases defense of up to 3 adjacent allies. The defense increases 20%, but goes up to 30%. So a 30% defense increase for up to 3 adjacent allies. That's actually pretty good. Every 2 seconds it deals 140% up to 180% AoE damage to up to 5 enemies, and additionally if directly hit by enemies, the hero will fight back by dealing 300% damage once. So for 20 seconds, he boosts allies' defense by 30%. Every 2 seconds he deals 140 to 180% AoE damage, and if he is directly attacked by an enemy, he will retaliate basically for 300% damage. So the main thing is the AoE boost of defense is quite interesting. That could scale very well in future. At the moment, as far as I'm aware, all of the defense scaling heroes are either Meriel or just like normal tanks. But yeah, pretty much all defenders. So it's not the most impressive thing to be boosting until we get like a fighter or a mage or a marksman on defense, I think. But we'll see. But the main thing is the retaliate. If there's a fast hitting enemy or if there's a bunch of enemies being blocked, he could just be shredding them with this. This could be very, very good. My first thought is he might be quite good in Guild War, just because it's a defender who you can put a Olag's Wall on him, stick him at the front, and get him to retaliate a bunch and deal with the enemies faster. But we'll have to see how he actually performs. So, passives. First passive, Thorny Grasp. When the ultimate is triggered, the hero pulls one unblocked target in range towards himself, so you can get him to snatch from other lanes if you get him to face across lanes. That's pretty cool. And his defense is increased by 10% and blocked by 1 until the ultimate ends. Additionally, ranged enemies will prioritize targeting the hero during this time. So he has a taunt. We have a first taunt that I'm aware of. This is the first taunt. I mean, they should have just called it a taunt, man. Like, this is a pretty big mechanic. Call it what it is. Jeez. Give the man his dues. That's a pretty powerful ability. To be able to taunt ranged attacks on him, and it seems to be just map scale, unless it's in his range, but it seems to be map scale. That's really quite big. That's a very, very, very useful ability to have. It would help in the Lycia stage of Void Rift, for example, I think. But yeah, generally, I think that's pretty cool. That's a really nice mechanic to just kind of subtly stick on at the end there in plain grey text. So what else does it do? The defense increase can go up to another 5%, so 15%. So he gains 15% defense when his ult is triggered. Okay, so this is all just his ultimate again. These are really, I find them frustrating. This passive is entirely just boosting his ultimate. I guess they didn't want his ultimate to be a gigantic block, so they just stuck it in a passive. So he is very dependent on his ultimate, which most esotericist heroes are. Finally, his second passive, Lightning Carapace. Each ultimate cast increases defense by 10% permanently, stacking up to 2 times. The defense increase can go up to 15%, and it can stack up to 4 times. And upon max stacks, so once he gets either 2 or 4 stacks, so that's an interesting one, it'll increase his block by a +1. So he could passively get up to 5 block if you're giving him the Olag's Wall artifact, and he could get a whole bunch of defense there. 15 times 4, 60% defense bonus from that, 15% defense bonus from this, and then another 30% defense bonus from this, assuming max skill up. So a massive amount of defense bonus on this guy. Again, I would build him pretty greedily, as I've said in other videos for defense heroes. I would try and build him as a DPS probably and stick some crit damage on the guy, get max crit, build as much defense as I can in sub, so pick up 1, even maybe 2 crit damage main stats, and then just go ham on as much defense as I can in subs, and obviously get to 100% crit rate. It just sounds interesting to me. He's got this retaliate system, he's got all this defense coming in, so I would build him with the hope that you can get him to block 5 enemies with Olag's Wall and his max stacks of this Carapace, and then just absolutely rinse things with retaliate and the occasional AoE proc. That's my thought at the moment. I think he sounds pretty good for that. So what about awakenings? Well, the first awakening, when HP is below 50%, it reduces all damage taken by 30% for 5 seconds. This effect can only be triggered once every 40 seconds. Okay, so I wasn't sure if it was worth mentioning this, but now I think it is worth mentioning this. My testing in the past, I used Garn. Garn is a defense scaling defender as well. He is the legendary lord for the Chaos faction. I actually pulled this guy on Forerunner, and in my usage of him, so his ultimate grants reduction of up to 50% at max skill ups, right? I built my Garn with so much defense that when I was testing in Artifact Material Raid 18, his ultimate did nothing. Basically, in this game, you may have noticed, but your damage can't be mitigated below 5%. I believe, I haven't tested, but I'm pretty certain the same holds true for enemies. You cannot reduce their damage below a certain threshold. So I built my Garn with so much defense. He's getting defense from this. He's getting more defense. He's getting a bunch of defense from this talent. He was getting defense from an artifact and from gear. And yeah, basically, his ultimate wasn't reducing the damage anymore. I think the defense was so high that it was crushing the enemy's damage to the minimum value. And then this extra 50% damage reduction had 0 effect. So I think you do need to be careful with defense scaling defenders that you're not wasting stats by going way too high and then suddenly hitting that 5% threshold. So this reducing damage taken by 30% is pretty cool, but if you're already building him super high on defense, it might not have any impact. So I think there's more of an argument to go to picking up at least 1 HP percent main or going the DPS route and picking up a crit damage main. I would advise against going triple defense percent on this guy, especially if you have Awakened 1. Obviously, this is an Awakened 1 discussion, but generally, with the amount of defense bonus this guy is gaining, and the fact that he has a pretty good base defense, you definitely want to be careful about overdoing it on defense, hitting the cap, and then just wasting stats. So yeah, a bit of a caveat there, a bit of a random tangent. It's just something I've noticed in the past. You don't want to be wasting resistance. So, moving on. Second Awakening is more defense, of course. The third Awakening, he deals extra damage to enemies blocked by himself. So his Retaliate is going to gain 20% damage. That's pretty cool. I like that. Fourth Awakening, I'm guessing, okay, damage reduction, sure. So it kind of feeds back into what we were just saying. And finally, the fifth Awakening. What is this? Receiving fatal damage restores 30% HP immediately. That's pretty cool. That's strong. Makes him really good in Gear Raid 2, right? He can just kind of effectively dodge damage once. That's quite nice, and this will work upon redeploying him, I'm certain. So overall, nice kit. I quite like him. I like his potential for the Retaliate mechanic. I like that he can get up to 5 block with an Olag's Wall, of course. And if you use him with a Isolde, his block would be really, really high. He would be retaliating on all those enemies. I like him. On paper, I actually really like him. So that's it for the video. We have Boreas and we have Trusk new on the Forerunner server. Hopefully they're coming to the global server before too long. I think these guys look really cool. I'm definitely going to play around with them on the test server when I get time. Let me know what you guys think of these heroes, if you can think of some interesting synergies I might have missed out on. But yeah, hopefully they come soon. They look really fun. Thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.